Hello, good morning, and or good afternoon. Let's have a conversation about statistics and just on a day like today, how it might help, right? Where it can be a bit scary. So sometimes when I post stats to some place like Reddit, get a lot of haters, right? And it's like, oh, there's no actionable data. There's nothing to tell you where to enter or where to exit. Well, that's not what this is for. This data is to support a strategy that you've already got. If you don't have a strategy, then statistical data is not going to help you because you won't know where to take a long or a short. You're just going to take it based on like high of day or low of day, or and then chase it back to a target that sometimes you'll win and sometimes you're not going to. All right. So anyway, if we were to let's go to none here. So if we were to look at the data just for the overnight. All right, and just for the overnight, meaning I'll show you what that means, but basically, this is the data that we're getting for the standard highs of day. Right? And we've already blown through that because of our London session rip, London open rip. And this is your low of day data. The low of day time is around 1800. And by a large margin, it's telling us that 1800. So it's basically telling us the low is most likely in. Okay. So if the low is most likely in, that's going to tell us we have a couple of possibilities. Right? We're going to go put a new high in at the open, or the most likely scenario, which is we're going to go put a new high in at the end of the day, closer to the end of the day, right? Starting around, noonish. But the further we get into the day, the more likely it's going to be. So let's flip back over. Now, there's lots more data here, right? There are statistical targets, time-based targets, like you name it, they're here. But for now, we're just going to focus on this, and we'll talk about a couple of the other stats. One of which I will show, which is this London model status. And then as we tend to set up the rest of our model into the open, right, it gives us this 77% here. And then if we were to give it the data that ended up happening, it'll give us a much, much higher statistic, which is 94% likely. Okay. And remember this, 94.34%. That's a pretty high chance. Okay. So let's flip back over to our main screen here. So what are we looking at? What does the overnight data mean? Well, the overnight data is based upon how the Asia session sets up, how the London session sets up, right? And that initial data we talked about was only based upon those two, right? So if we were to go back and look at that, we had those fingers that kind of told us where the market was going to go beyond, because we were basically in a bit of an anomaly territory. So the highest, most likely place was this 3.1. We'd already basically hit everything else. So if we're going to go get this 3.1, what does that mean? Do we have anything, let's say harmonic-wise, that takes us there? And now keep in mind, this is before the open. All right, so, the market's doing exactly what we thought it would here, but we'll say this is before the open. So what do we have setting up? We've got this butterfly setting up to this 21,019-ish area. Probably a little further than that. Let's go here. Yeah, so 21,020. Well, this 3.1 inside of this 3.1 tends to kind of line up with that. All right, so if you're going to try to short this, you need to understand a couple of things. Actually, more than a couple of things. There is a chance some days that set up like this, they just want to keep going. And what they do is this. Every time you short, you get taken out. And you just have to be able to identify that's probably what's going to happen and skip the day if that's what's going to happen. Okay. Then you also have to understand, if you short this, that this thing could go back up into this range because there is a small pattern here setting up to take us up there. All right. So what does that mean? You either need to ride it up there, you need to wait for it to get up there, potentially miss the trade to the downside, or you can add up there. Now, if you keep going outside of that, you need to figure out where your stops are going to be and just call it a loss and move on. It's just life and trading some days. But if you take the short, what's the setup? Well, you've got a pattern right here. Right, this is going to take you down to this area right here, this 886. And you got a pattern that's going to take you down to basically beyond the 886. You're really looking to come down here to this 2649. All right, so this morning we talked about this. All right, and so we talked about, let's see here. So if we pop to that area up there, that's supposed to be 21,000, but it's not. It said 20. I meant 21,027. And we get the setup to dump. Like, that's the area up here, right? Into this high range here to get that butterfly completion. Butterflies are pretty notorious for trying to reverse pretty quickly, especially the bigger ones. But either way, if you don't know harmonics, you have to figure out if you've got anything up there. So if you enter that short, you got to either add up here or just know that it's going to go up there, as we said, right? And then we have this idea of a pull down to what? 20,800. Why? Because there's a pattern that takes us down there, right in this range. There's also down here, and especially down in here, right around the middle of this London session, there's a large imbalance, a buying imbalance in there. And if you don't know what that is on an actual footprint chart, that's something you can either read up on. I'm not going to explain what that is. So that's the area that if it's going to try to pull through, it's going to dig into as much of that money as it can before it bounces, right? So the ultimate setup here, pull through the London mid, reach for 12-hour mid and bounce. London mid here, 12-hour mid here. All right. So we get to this point where we're in the short around 900. Okay. And then we get to this point right here where we're just kind of sitting in here. So what I ended up doing is down here, I took a little bit more, and then I set my stops around the entry around 900. And then I put this. If we get down to 700, I'm going to take the rest. Stops up around 900. Why 700? Because there was another huge imbalance around 700. And if this is how we're acting around the first imbalance, the next imbalance, if we get down there, which was highly likely just because of statistical data, it was likely we were going to get through this, right? And for a couple of reasons. One, we'll get into that in a second. So the idea being, we get down there to 700, I'm out. Right, look at that. Because the imbalance was there. I wasn't looking to go any lower anymore. There was even another pattern here that didn't work. It was supposed to get us down here, and it didn't work. So anytime we start pumping the brakes too hard, we get in those imbalances, I'm not looking to ride it down to the close of the pattern. I'm looking to get out a little early. But that's just how I trade. Doesn't make me perfect, right? So where are we going to long if we're going to long it? Well, we're going to long in that imbalance because it's coming up short of our pattern. Now, you could also long off of this London mid here if you wanted to and try to ride it back through the high side. That just depends on you. So now let's talk about standard stats, right? Typically, it's more likely we're going to blow back through in a normal market, on a standard market, and we're talking about just statistically, it's more likely than not that if we go short here, we're going to get back to the other side of it. Okay? Now, in the second half of the day, meaning after lunch, it's more likely that whatever direction we go, we're going to continue to go. Doesn't mean it's 100%, it just means it's more likely. So here is the other interesting thing about statistics that need to be understood. When there is an 80 or 90% chance or whatever their percent chance is, there's a reason that it's not 100% because it doesn't always get there. Okay? But the interesting thing is the attempt is usually there. Whether you get there or not is another story. It's a stat because it's happened, which means it tries. Right? And this idea that stats don't work and they're stupid and it's just crazy. It's crazy talk. Everything about trading is statistical. Okay? There's no feelings and gambling and all of that. Yes, when you see certain candle setups, they do tend to work. You know why they work? Because statistically they work. Statistically, those candle setups happen. Or statistically, your your channels happen before you get an additional downside pull to which you go back to the middle of and try to break through the side. Like, that's because statistically they work. The reason people play them is because statistically they work, or statistically they don't. Okay, so knowing that the attempt is to get back through this other side, usually we're looking for this before 10:30 or 11:30. It doesn't mean that it won't still go in that direction. The attempt is going to be there. If it's not going to be there, you're going to get these normal setups that we see when we don't get a lot of recovery. A little bit of a move back to the upside, a wick, and a dump back through. A little bit to the upside, a wick, and a dump back through. And you're going to constantly get that. And what you're going to get is these hourly candles that you rarely, if ever, go back and break the high of. So if you see that, then just be aware of it. But until you do, know that the attempt is going to be to get back to the other side of this first half of the New York session. All right. And then, of course, the second half being whichever direction you tend to go, we're going to try to continue. Because statistics. That's why. So, I don't know if this helps, but I kind of wanted to go over how, even on a day like today, statistically, you can trade if you understand how your strategy works and how to use it around statistical analysis. All right, so even today, we've got this downside move. Now we've got this upside move in the second half of the day that's going to try to actually make this stat work. Now, it's too late for it to count. Okay? But we know that the attempt, especially now that we know the second half will try to continue in the same direction, doesn't mean it will. Okay? But this counts against our stat. And that's okay, because you got to draw the line somewhere. But I hope this helps. If you have any questions, if you want to talk about it, if you want access to this information, you want to come hang out, let me know. And you can find me on X. I go by Evelyn Killface on X. And then, I'll hopefully see everybody throughout the week.